Okay, we're officially starting. Kasey, here we go. Welcome to the Heart of Innovation webinar series. This is our third year of doing a webinar series. This is our 2021 version, and we're really glad that you could make it here live. Or if you're watching us as a recorded session, thank you, thank you. I know we have a lot of teachers that have to teach during the day, Kasey, and can't make it out at 10 in the morning, but they're happy to watch this recorded version of it. Just to let you know, our 2021 lineup, Kasey's right here for our fall version. We had Dee this summer in July, and now we are thrilled to have Kasey with us now here in October. Coming up in February, we have the HyperDocs team, and so we're excited about that, February 15th. You might want to save that date for another webinar, and of course, we do offer it with a class, and this is our way of bringing national speakers to you, because we know it's hard to get substitutes and we know it's hard and expensive to travel. So we're bringing these people to you as a free experience. Our digital learning tech team is here to bring that stuff to you. So today we have Kasey Bell and if that was our registration information there. A little bit about Kasey. She is the founder and the CEO of the Shake Up Learning. I would say it's an educational enterprise. shakeuplearning.com is her home base. And I'll read this bio and you can read along with us from home. Kasey Bell is a former middle school teacher turned award-winning digital learning coach, international speaker, author, blogger, and podcaster with a Texas-sized passion for technology and learning. Whether it is learning from home through online courses, professional developments, conference workshops, or as a keynote speaker, Kasey is a relentless innovator of ideas and a devoted transformer of classrooms and teaching. Through teacher empowering publications, and I've got one of them right here, Shake Up Learning, which we're studying as part of our class. Shake Up Learning, practical ideas to move our teaching from static to dynamic. All the other award-winning educational resources at shakeuplearning.com. You have your workshops that you offer. I know the back to school conference was really exciting that I participated in. Great stuff there. Presentations, and her Shake Up Learning weekly podcast, which is on my always updated list. So Kasey proves why we should never see the boring when it comes to bringing out the very best in our students, and we should always strive to shake up learning. So without further ado, I'm going to stop my share, and Kasey, I think if you would like to see your slides, that is linked in our course, and it was on the slide, so we can put that in the chat as well, so you can have access to these slides as we go. All right, thanks, Kasey, take it away.
Yeah, well, I will share my screen and also give you a shortened link so that you can access those slides. And I always share my slides so that you can come back to this later. Tons of resources in here, tons of additional links. And so shakeup.link/Heartland. Open that up, keep it open, follow along, bookmark it. You can come back to it. It's not going anywhere. It will also be at the bottom of the slides as we go. This is what I call the one link to rule them all, because I hate it when people force me to write down 20 million links during a presentation, because then I miss whatever they're talking about next, trying to write something down. So I try not to do that to you. I want you to have all these resources at your disposal. So thank you so much for inviting me today. I love, love, love sharing my passions and talking about teaching and learning. I am a techie girl. Y'all see my podcast mic hanging here. I love technology, but really my bottom line is always about learning. And that's what the book was about, is really about how to shake up learning and all the things that I've learned, as I tell people so many times, the hard way as a teacher, that I don't want everybody else to have to learn the hard way. So we're going to talk about some dynamic learning makeovers and upgrades, how we can take some old school lessons and really give them a refresh. But before we get into that, I am going to give you the overview of dynamic learning. So just so you get to hear it, I know some of you are reading along in the book and have read my words there, but this is printed actually at the bottom of the front cover of the book, that technology is not a solution. It's not the magic bullet. It's not going to solve all of our problems in education as much as some of us would like to think that it is the magic bullet. It is not, but what it presents us with is an opportunity. And that's how I like to sell it to those who both like technology and to those who may be slightly resistant, that it's an opportunity for our students. It's an opportunity to do things differently. And it's an opportunity to learn in ways that most of us didn't get the chance to learn when we were in a K-12 environment. But we're going to talk about how to move from this idea of static teaching to dynamic learning, and purposely notice my word choice there. So static and dynamic are used to compare and contrast a lot of different things. I think these words came to me as a language arts teacher. I used to teach static and dynamic characters. And that was something that we commonly, compare, but I think there's static and dynamic stretching. I think my car has like a dynamic mode. So we see these words everywhere, and it really just kind of fit what I was thinking about in terms of static teaching, that old school way of doing things, lectures, teachers in front of the room, desks in rows, everybody doing the same thing at the same time, versus dynamic learning, where we're really embracing all of those opportunities that we have before us today. So these are my working definitions. These are the definitions that appeared in the first book. I have gradually begun evolving these too. If anybody has picked up my latest book, which is Blended Learning with Google, which is essentially taking these ideas and just talking about how to apply Google tools, but really in the state that we have been in for the past couple of years, this pandemic teaching, whatever you want to call it, some of these words in the definition ring a little bit more true, I think, even in today's world. So let me start with the static side, because this was very much what my classroom looked like when I began teaching. I didn't know any better. I taught the way I was taught. I taught the way my mentor instructed me to teach. And this is our working definition here. Static learning is characterized by an overall lack of movement, growth, and action. It's learning that happens in short bursts, most often demonstrated by the learner completing one and done activities, short-term assignments, and standalone worksheets, even digital worksheets, all confined within the bounds of the traditional school day. On the other side, we have dynamic learning. And dynamic learning is characterized by constant change in activity. That's the way our world works these days, right? That's what technology does to our world. This learning takes place organically, growing and evolving through more unconventional means, with the learner collaborating, creating, and communicating to demonstrate progress and mastery. This learning and the completion of projects, think project-based learning, often extends beyond the boundaries of the traditional school day. We broke all kinds of boundaries with the pandemic, haven't we? We've broken things that we thought couldn't even be broken down. We found ways to do things. So when I read these words, I just think so differently now than when I originally wrote these back in 2017. Beyond the physical location of the classroom, just like we're doing today. And this is not new. This is something we've been able to do for a long time, but how many more people are embracing this as a way to learn? I think the world has become much more open to this, even when we can meet face to face. So that makes this ring true in a different way. Beyond the physical location of the classroom, and even the traditional notion of hard and fast due dates. So static versus dynamic. Now, this is what I call the dynamic learning framework. So at the center, you see the dynamic learning model, and at the heart of that is learning, right? It's all about the learning. You do not see technology at the center of everything. You see learning at the center. Around that, in that gray circle, the 4 C's. Anytime I walk into a classroom and I see something that amazes me or impresses me, I guarantee you I see at least one, if not more, of the 4 C's. And for me, these are just foundational. So I'm always thinking 4 C's. Now, those color-coded icons are the characteristics, and we're going to break those down in just a second. And then that purple outer ring is the entire lesson planning cycle. So purposeful planning, focused on learning outcomes, fearless implementation, facilitated with finesse, honest reflection, and share with the world. So that's the model. Now let's dig into those characteristics. So when I was putting this together, this framework, and trying to think of all the things, like how do I put this into one idea that teachers can walk away with and understand? And really what came to me was just this idea of going beyond what we thought was possible in our classroom. And that's what technology allows us to do. But you will notice that technology really isn't in this framework, that it's all about using this technology to engage and increase learning. So we're going to talk about how to go beyond the bell, beyond the grade level and subject area, beyond the walls, beyond the tools, and beyond the due date. And there is a link on this slide if you want a PDF download of this framework here. Okay, so let's talk about these characteristics. I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview. I know you're reading the book, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page before we kind of get into the makeovers and the do this, not that. So beyond the bell, it has nothing to do with doing things after the bell. A lot of people tend to think that means homework. That's not what we're talking about. Beyond the bell is a lifelong learning mindset for students. And the whole reason Beyond the Bell came to me was really just about how I thought about my middle schoolers and how they would line up at the door at the end of the day. And it was really the end of their work day. And they didn't think of school as learning. They thought of school as work. It's like watching Fred Flintstone fly down the tail of the dinosaur at the end of the workday. They want it to be done. But I want kids to recognize learning, whether it happens inside the school walls or after the school bell, that learning is learning. And I want them to have that growth mindset. Beyond the grade and subject is really about helping students explore their own interests and passions that may go beyond what our curriculum says that we have to teach. And that's not necessarily teaching something additional, but really just providing the wiggle room for kids to explore some ideas. Because to me, I see this happen year after year, but it is just so sad to see seniors graduating from high school who really have no idea what they're truly interested in, that all they are used to is what gives me credit, what is going to transfer, AP courses and all of those things. But what are you really passionate about? And I want to help kids find that. Beyond the walls, well, we're doing that right now, right? But that wall is two-sided. I want you to think about bringing the outside world into your classroom, as well as sharing what your students do with the outside world. I believe that every student in every grade level should have the opportunity to share their work with a different audience besides the teacher, besides just the students in their classroom. So there's so many ways we can do this: global connections, collaborations, virtual field trips. And I have shared so many of my own stories of publishing. In fact, I think there's a question about blogging that maybe we'll get to in a little bit as well. Beyond the tools, and this one is the easiest one. I learned this very quickly after asking for contributions to the book, and especially when I was writing the follow-up. But I just want everybody to know Beyond the Tools is the easiest, and sometimes we cling to it a little too much because it is the easiest. But when we go beyond the tool, we're learning how to use digital tools beyond substitution, right? Beyond just replacing paper, that we're learning how to use them to do new things, and sometimes using them in alternative ways for things that they weren't necessarily designed to do. And then beyond the due date, which I know can sound really scary as a teacher, this is not about giving kids extra time. This is just helping to encourage students to continue learning about the things that interest them, even after it's been assessed, and about creating learning experiences that go far beyond that one and done, because technology allows us to build long-term assignments that don't necessarily have to be physically turned in, but that can build and grow online, that it's not just about due dates anymore, that it's something that we can build together, even throughout a semester or 6 weeks or even the entire school year. Oh, sorry, I don't know why I have this emphasis in here. Keep going. Okay, so our essential components. So a dynamic learning experience is a fancy word for a lesson plan. I wanted to change that word mostly because the word lesson plan has such a bad connotation. It tends to make teachers' eyes roll in the back of their head when we talk about lesson plans. And really, it's not planning the lesson because, again, that's static. That's teacher focused. When we're student focused, we are creating an experience for students. And that's really where those words come from. So we want to include at least one of those beyonds, one of those characteristics that I just went through. It doesn't mean every lesson's going to have all. Y'all, there are very few exceptions that are that perfect, right? There's no perfect lesson plan. We're going to include at least one of the 4 C's. And we're going to include at least one of the ISTE standards for students. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the ISTE standards for students. If you've been reading the book, you've probably had a little bit of exposure, but ISTE stands for the International Society for Technology and Education. And one of the reasons I included this is I like these. They align very well with the entire framework. There's a lot of overlap. The 4 C's overlap with these everywhere. But I also needed standards that were something that teachers around the globe could identify with. I'm in Texas. We do our own thing in Texas in terms of Texas standards. We are not Common Core. We have the TEKS, and every different variation that we have, not only in the US, but across the globe, because I do work with teachers across the globe. I needed something that we could all kind of have a foundation for. So if you haven't really explored these, they are something that I think naturally work, and you will see that they're focused on learning, not on tech skills, which the former version of these were very much about like word processing and typing and all of those things. No, we're focused on learning. So these all align very well together. And then, of course, your own grade level and content area standards. What you know your content, you know what they need. So you're going to make sure that you're meeting those learning goals in your dynamic learning experience. So let's talk about strategies. So I've got some little icons here to help you kind of remember which of the characteristics we're talking about. So this mindset, this growth mindset beyond the bell, one thing we can do is talk it out. Right? Start a discussion with students about their learning. What do they like? What do they struggle with? What would they learn if they had complete control over time and place? And this is something that I had a really interesting experience with when I facilitated a student panel a few years ago. And if you've never asked students and put them on a stage in front of teachers, and I don't mean necessarily putting kids on the spot, but I mean get kids talking and sharing that as a professional learning experience is huge. What they can tell you is amazing. So this school district was 1-to-1 with MacBook Airs at secondary, 1-to-1 with iPads at elementary. They had the stuff, right? They had spent a lot of money, they had invested, and I wanted to know, what were they getting for that? You know, just because they have fancy devices doesn't mean they are learning anything more than a school that doesn't. And so what I asked these students was, okay, if you still had to come to school every single day, but you could learn anything you wanted to, what would you want to learn? The little ones, so I had 3rd grade up to 12th grade. The little ones, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they all wanted to learn how to draw. And it became contagious. Once the first one said, I want to draw, they all were like, yeah, me too. I want to learn how to draw. And they just lit up. They were so excited about it. But by the time I got up to those upper grade levels, the juniors and seniors could not articulate what they wanted to learn without a follow-up question to me on what it had to do with credit. What was it, an AP course? What was it? Now, keep in mind, this was a summer experience. These kids were either volunteers or they were teachers' kids. So I had some high achievers on this panel. This was not just a sampling of every level of learning on this panel. So these upper level kids were going Ivy League. These were some kids who knew how to play the game of school very well. But again, how heartbreaking is it that they don't actually know what they want to learn? They just know how to play the game, how to fill in the blanks, how to comply with the things that they have learned in the school system. So it can be a really powerful strategy. Get to know your kids, ask them those questions. Another strategy that I love is student created learning goals. So having students set goals. One, this is an ISTE standard. This aligns with the Empowered Learner strand. This is a research-based strategy, not only for kids, but for adults. It's something that helped me write a book by setting a goal that I wanted to write a book. And I was like, why are we not doing this with students? And even from a young age. So we want kids to articulate their goals aligned with what maybe they're learning in your class, but also, let them set a few personal goals. One, that helps you get to know them and build that relationship. And two, we're going to talk about what it looks like when you reach a goal. So one of the most popular ways to do this has been one of my most popular blog posts, was student created vision boards. And this was with Google Slides. This is just a little sample slide that I put together. It's essentially a collage, right? It's a digital collage. Now, I have created vision boards for years. This is not anything new. I've done it, old school, foam board, washi tape, markers, magazines, all the things. And it occurred to me, well, if this is something that helps me, why can't this help my students? And so as we go through this and you think about this, yeah, Google Slides made a great place to do this. You could do this in drawings as well, but we're just layering in a visual representation of what those goals could look like. Another place to track learning goals is Google Keep. I love Keep. This is probably, I would say, 4th or 5th grade and up. But it's just a great way, because if you set goals, you have to come back to them, or it's a worthless activity. And we want students to recognize, okay, am I hitting a milestone? What does it look like when I reach a goal? And even with the littles who we may not be tracking them, we could just say, hey, what's one thing that would make today great? Or what are 3 things that would make today great? And I know what my 8th graders would do. Miss, I want to make an A in your class. That's what they would say. Okay, but I want us to equate it with learning. And so grades do not always equal learning. What does it look like? What do you have to know and be able to do to make an A in this class? So I really want them to make those connections. So our next strategy or characteristic is the going beyond the grade level and subject area, which I know, again, sounds like I'm asking you to teach something else, and it's really not. There are a lot of ways to move beyond just what your curriculum says you have to teach. And project-based learning is probably one of the number one ways to do that, whether that's maker projects or genius hour. These are pretty big ideas that maybe you're not able to do in every single classroom. But stay with me here. Entrepreneurial learning is something else that I spoke about in the book, because so many people have become online entrepreneurs. It's a different world when you don't have to actually rent a space in a building to own a business anymore. But those skills are things that I guarantee you want to see in your students, whether they become entrepreneurs or not. Risk-taking, practicing the art of curiosity, perseverance, problem solving, and taking ownership of their learning. Design thinking is a creative problem solving protocol that many of you have probably heard about. It is definitely worth taking a look if you haven't. This is a higher level skill, so definitely probably high school or at least secondary if you're looking for some creative ways to approach problems in your classroom. But the number one strategy that I want to give you to go beyond the grade level and subject area is student choice. That to me is where the wiggle room is, and where it was in my own classroom, being able to give students some choice. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that to help them explore new ideas, to try new things, and find their interests and passions. So it might be choosing their own digital tool. They may have experienced several different things and know how to use several different tools, and selecting the right one for their activity. Choosing their own device. I bet many of you are sitting in front of a laptop and probably have your phone and maybe something else too, maybe even a tablet. You have multiple devices. And I know what I do, because I have my phone sitting right here. There are still things that even when I'm sitting in front of my big desktop computer, I pick up and do on my phone. kids need to know how to choose the right device, because some things are easier on a phone and some things are easier on a desktop or a laptop. Choosing their own learning goals, like we just talked about. And of course, choosing their own reading, their own topic, maybe for research, their own project or problem to solve for PBL. And one of my favorites, which is choice boards. And so choice boards allow us to build in all kinds of choice, but allow us to differentiate and provide flexible learning paths. But if you're providing choice for the first time, start small. It can be extremely overwhelming. I can tell you it's overwhelming for adults who are not used to experiencing choice. When I teach a workshop and I give choice, teachers do the exact same things that my middle schoolers would do. They will worry and worry and worry about making the perfect choice because they're used to this idea of there only being one correct way to do something. And so that's something new that we have to help them understand. So learning menus or choice boards, to me, those words are interchangeable, are all about choice. And this is a form of differentiated learning that gives students a choice of learning activities. And there's a million different ways to do this. I have done several podcasts and blog posts and even put together a guide to digital choice boards if you want to dig deeper. They are in the first book, but there's even more that I have done since I wrote that first book. But, it might be tic-tac-toe, which is honestly still my favorite. A restaurant style menu, a bingo board. It could just be a list on the board. Like I could put 3 different things, write it on the board and say, pick one. It doesn't have to be fancy or complicated, but it can help us, again, just find that wiggle room. So as I was writing the book, I wanted to be clear about something with creating this framework. I didn't want anyone to think that technology is going to automatically be dynamic. It's not. I don't know how many of you remember, if they're still floating around, but if you've ever been on Pinterest, you may have seen some images that align, like the icon for a digital tool with Bloom's taxonomy. Like if you use Google Drive, you're going to be at this level. I'm like, what? That doesn't even make sense. So, to me, I just wanted to make it clear that it's not the technology, it's what you do with the technology that will help us be more dynamic. So those tools are not inherently creative or innovative on their own. Do I have any questions I need to answer so far, Catherine? Are we okay?
It looks okay so far. No,
Okay.
no questions. Thanks for pausing.
Yeah. Feel free to interrupt me if there's something I need to explain.
Yeah, and we are using the hashtag HAEA Innovate if anybody wants to join our conversation on Twitter as well. We'll put that in the chat as well.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our next strategy, talking about moving beyond the tools. Remember, I told you that's the easiest one. We're going to think about using digital tools to do new things. We're moving beyond that substitution level and thinking beyond just replacing paper. And this I thought we had done a lot of work in this moving beyond substitution before the pandemic hit. And then my website was just inundated with teachers who knew nothing about this idea. And how many times I get asked how to put a worksheet in Google Classroom. In fact, I got asked that so many times. I did a podcast called Stop Asking Me How to Put a Worksheet in Google Classroom. And we can debate the whole worksheet thing. Not all worksheets are equal, but in my mind, a lot of times when you're digitizing something, you're just trying to make it fit into this round hole and it's a square peg. And a lot of times we're making it harder on us as teachers. It might be more time consuming when there might be something that we could do that we couldn't previously do when that was paper based. And so we might be missing a big opportunity. So that's really what I want you to think about. one thing I talk a lot about, if you follow me, you know, Google Slides is my fave. It is just like the Swiss Army knife of Google. You can do so many things besides just a presentation. Like I'm using it right now for my presentation, but I have some links there to several other posts that I've done. But you can create ebooks, you can do stop motion animation, you can do infographics, you can do all kinds of things that are not just about creating a presentation and really it becoming a creation tool and not just a communication tool. So I want you to think about what you're doing in your classroom and how you can kind of go beyond what was previously possible, that we're not just replacing paper. And I know there are a lot of sophisticated frameworks out there, and I think I still have it in here, but really I just like to think of it as a continuum. You know, substitution still has its place. I wrote my book in Google Docs, but guess what? I started moving the needle when my editors were in there and we were using suggesting edits and we were using comments and we were using the chat. We were doing things we couldn't do when it was just paper-based. Beyond the due date is, again, I know that one sounds kind of scary, but I want you to consider allowing students to continue the work that interests them even after it's been assessed. And this is where this idea comes from. I know in my own classroom, this did not happen very often, but I do remember one particular story, and I think it's in the book, that I had a student who was working on a project for me. It was a physical project, and she would come in every day before school to talk to me about what she did. And she was so excited. Miss Bell, Miss Bell, Miss Bell, I did this, 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 and this. And she's like, and tomorrow I'm going to try this. And she just loved, you know, telling me how into this project she was. She was enjoying herself. But when it came time to turn it in, Miss Bell, Miss Bell, Miss Bell, can I please just have one more day? Can I please just have one more day? But because I actually needed to physically see this project to put the grade in the grade book, you know, I had to tell her, okay, you have to turn it in and I'll get it back to you as soon as I can and you can keep going. But guess what happens when she turns it in? She stops. She's stifled. She loses her momentum. She loses her enthusiasm and she stops working and showing any passion. Now, this particular student that I remember did not have a lot of passion for anything else. And so those are learning sparks that I want us to take advantage of, that we can just take on that mentor role. You know, if you've got a student who is really into one particular topic that you're studying, you know, I was a reading teacher, so there might be an author that a student just really, really enjoyed. I'm like, oh, if you like this author, then you'll love this author. Go check out this book in the library. Or have you seen this YouTube video? Or talk to this other student who has similar interests. It might, you know, you're just building that relationship. But students can continue to learn and create and do so much more with those digital products. You know, my story was kind of before everything was so digital, but if that student had been allowed to keep working, say in Google, and I got my grade in, I assessed it, I could see it all, she could keep going and I didn't have to stifle her. Okay, so some strategies for this. Project-based learning is the perfect way to build on prior knowledge and continue to learn and grow. I love PBL. Share your voice, share your story, help students document their learning, reflect, and share with the world. And there's so many different ways to do that. And we can do that without sharing, you know, personal information. And to always be learning, you know, going beyond the due date helps students become those lifelong learners. So now we're circling back to that mindset. So this all kind of connects back. And then, as I said, you know, becoming a coach or a mentor as you get to know your students, encouraging them to explore their own interests and passions. You never know what one thing might be the passion for that student. Okay, do I have any other questions yet? As I get a drink of water.
No, but everything you're saying is so great for this class because it's just lining up exactly with what we're talking about in class. And at the end, they are going to build a dynamic learning experience and then implement it. So this is going to be great resource information for exactly what we're doing in class.
Perfect.
We do have one question.
I have a question, Kasey. I had a teacher shared, I love choice boards and I think that they're absolutely great for kids. And I had a teacher kind of I don't know about pushback or just kind of question, because they said some of our students lack the executive functioning of making a choice. Like often they are looking for the easiest one, or they're just like, I can't quite handle that. So I know you could scaffold it. I know you could maybe even offer less choices, but what are some, I guess off the cuff, because I know I'm just asking a question here without giving you any time to prep for that, but what are some ways that you could scaffold maybe for some kids who don't have the executive function and can't make choices right now, or have a
As I
hard
mentioned earlier, there are adults who don't have that function.
right.
So, and they need it. And especially in today's world when we are inundated with choice. I mean, even just shopping for one little thing, there's so many different varieties of things these days that this is a must-have skill. So you cannot ignore it and just say they can't do it. That's an excuse. That is not an acceptable excuse for me, coming from a teacher, that we definitely have to begin that process. The more they do it, the better they get. And again, coming back, one of the biggest reasons why K-12 students have such a hard time with this is because of standardized testing. They are told there is one correct way to do something. If you remember Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk, he says there's one correct answer. It's in the back of the book. And if you look, that's cheating. That's the world that our kids are being schooled in. And so to suddenly introduce them and say, you've got choice, they don't understand that. And I'll tell you who suffers the most. It's the high achievers. Do not like choice because they are used to being provided the path. My pre-AP kids, the first time I did choice boards, my pre-AP kids came up to me, Miss Bell, which one should I do? You get to pick. No, but Miss Bell, which way is the way to the 110? They did not understand that there was no difference. So one, balancing the rigor, the relevance, and the time, which can be very difficult because kids just take different amounts of time, but you have to balance that choice board. There should not be an easy way out. There should not be, something that takes 5 minutes versus something that takes 30 minutes. Those should not be up against each other. I learned that lesson very quick. And I believe I do explain that in the book, kind of my lesson design with the tic-tac-toe in particular. But yeah, you definitely have to scaffold it. You don't want to introduce too many new things. So for instance, in terms of technology, maybe there's only one new thing on that choice board, and those who still are not comfortable with the choice can maybe have some comfort in the tech or comfort in the content. And remember, this is differentiation. This is a way to differentiate not just technology, but content, product, and process can all be part of this. So I have read many books by Carol Ann Tomlinson and all of her co-authors. She's kind of my go-to when it comes to differentiation. And that is something that we're told to do and don't always know how to do it. And for me, choice boards was my first way of really trying to provide that flexible learning path. But if every choice aligns with the learning goal, then we're headed in the right direction, because every kid doesn't have to get there the same way. Every person listening to today's webinar will have a different takeaway, and we can all get there in different paths. So, I would just encourage someone who's not doing that to, hey, just put 2 things on the board, choose one, take it down to its most simplistic version. But if we don't give them choices by the time they're adults, then they're really in trouble, because we are just overwhelmed with choice in the world that we live in now. I hope that helps.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm talking too much. I got 20 minutes to get through the do this, not that part. And this is the original infographic. I've done a couple of updates on the blog to sharing some Google specific things, and those have been kind of worked into this presentation. But you aren't still on MySpace, so why are you still handing out worksheets? Now, every time I say this, I'm secretly worried that somebody really still is on MySpace, because I think it got bought out by Justin Timberlake and became this like music thing. But the point is, the world keeps changing, right? The world keeps changing and evolving, and the way we do things is changing and evolving, and education kind of gets stuck in a rut. We're kind of the last people who, and it's not always our fault, it's just part of this old system of, you know, this industrial revolution designed educational system that we have, and we really have to just think beyond just busy work. So I'm going to give you this, these upgrades, these makeovers, and the do this, not that style. So here's the continuum that I mentioned earlier in terms of going beyond the tool being the easiest of these, right? I just like to think of, okay, on one side, we're at substitution, and then we just keep moving the needle. Sometimes we can hit over here, sometimes we're in the middle, and sometimes substitution still has its place. I find that SAMR, TPAC, some of the other more sophisticated models, which are great, can be intimidating for teachers who are afraid of technology to begin with. So I like to keep it simple and keep it practical. So let's kick things off here with an old static lesson, the personal narrative essay. And don't get me wrong, I was a writing teacher. We still have to teach writing. Just stay with me here. What if instead we did storytelling with Google Slides and added narration? They're still writing, but they're telling the story in a visual way, and they're learning how to do it using tools that were not really designed for that. So they're going to go beyond the tool with that. I'm going to keep going. These are going to be quick hits, y'all. Instead of explaining a concept in a presentation, right? That's a common thing that we do in a lot of different classrooms. In fact, I can tell you, even way back in the PowerPoint days, my students would just get tired of PowerPoint because they were asked in every single class to continue to keep doing the same types of activities. But we want them to understand and be able to explain something. So what if instead they wrote a story for younger children to teach that concept? I've seen this interpreted in several different ways, but there are a lot of ways that older kids can teach younger kids. And if you can teach a concept, you're hitting a higher level, right? So this one goes beyond the tool. This is a guest blog post from Mike Muhammad, and he teaches high school physics. And his high school physics students created read-along storybooks that taught physics to kindergarten. So just kind of wrap your head around that for a second. One, you may be thinking, oh, that's too simple for high school students. Is it? How do they have to break down those sophisticated concepts into something that a 5-year-old can understand? So they did this in Google Slides, and they made use of the audio function and made them read along. So they narrated them. And then they got to exchange flip grids with the kids. And I got to see some of them. They were adorable watching those kindergartners. They loved the stories. But just this idea of older kids teaching younger kids a concept, because if you're teaching, again, just remember, that means you have a deeper understanding. Instead of solving a word problem from the textbook, right? Math teachers, I know we've got to teach word problems, and they come from various places. Maybe it's not the textbook, but stay with me here. What if instead students created and solved their own word problem and illustrated it as a story using Jamboard or Google Drawings? So they're still digging into the math concepts that you want. There's still going to be some requirements, and they're still solving a word problem. But if you've ever had students writing their own problems, you also know that that can also trigger some great critical thinking skills. And that one also goes beyond the tool. All right, instead of a research paper about environmental impact, right? Okay, environment's very important. We need to talk about it. But what if instead of just researching, that students conducted their own environmental survey, surveying the community with Google Forms, analyzing the data with Google Sheets, and then they write their paper, right? How much more powerful or sticky is the learning when they are conducting their own survey? Of course, this is something for older kids. This is another way to go beyond the tool. Now, I'm also have said this many times, but Google Forms is not just a teacher tool. Kids need to learn how to use forms, and they need to learn how to use sheets. This world we live in is big data. Data is everywhere, and every job just about requires some kind of understanding of data. So this can be really important. Okay, we got an elementary lesson here, making 5, 10, or 15 with manipulatives, right? Kids had to learn how to count, and making 5, 10, 15, and on up. What if instead they had an interactive Google Sheet that showed them the basics and foundations for algebra? So this lesson is in the book. This is from Christine Pinto, who is a kindergarten teacher in California. And Christine has created this template, by the way, that you can go make a copy of. And what I want you to watch in this animation. So you see the numbers in the colored boxes below. She's using conditional formatting. So you type in a 4, it turns orange. You type in a 2, it turns green and orange. Then they have to write the equation. Okay. Algebra, foundations for algebra in kindergarten. 3 + 2 = 5, and they check their answer. Okay, first wrap your head around the fact that a kindergartner is using Google Sheets, because I know adults who are afraid of Google Sheets. Second, Christine does teach in a one-to-one environment with Chromebooks, and she is amazing. If you teach littles, you definitely need to follow Christine Pinto. And by the way, this links back to her lesson in her blog post where you can go make a copy of it, but where she talks about how she does it and how she explains it to her students. I have taught Google Sheets explicitly, and I know so many teachers who are just intimidated by it, but this is a great experience for the littles. Okay, what if instead of the old static paper reading log, right? Language arts teacher had so many reading logs stacked up on my desk at all times. Yeah, we got to read. We need to track it. What else can we do? We can use Google Sheets to track it. And again, this one goes beyond the tool. So this template is from Lisa Johnson. Y'all may know her as Tech Chef for You, another Texas teacher. And Lisa shared this template and actually several others that are just amazing. So you can get a copy of it with the link on this slide. But we're just tracking, the number of pages, the title. I always had reading responses that were required and prompts and things like that. But it's just another way to expose them to Google Sheets while tracking important information and allowing them to see progress over time that we don't always get to see on a piece of paper. So that's another way to think about it. Okay, instead of a presentation about an important event in history, maybe it's the Battle of Waterloo, maybe it's the Battle of the Alamo, whatever it is, just think an important event. What if instead we did storytelling with comic strips and Google Slides or Google Drawings? Now, this one is something that is kind of near and dear to my heart from a special experience I had with my students. But I had my students retell the Telltale Heart through comic strips. Some of you may have read the story in the book, and it was an eye-opening experience. It turned out really great, even though I didn't quite plan it that way. But what comic strips force students to do is to be concise and to tell a story in a different way. Now, be very careful with your content, because it's not necessarily appropriate I would not do the Holocaust in a comic strip because it changes the tone and mood. So you just have to be very, very careful about that. But storytelling in general is a great strategy, but the comic strip thing, because you're not going to give them unlimited boxes to tell their story, right? You're going to give them a limit. And so limitations can actually push students to think more critically. This is an example from Sylvia Duckworth, and she contributed the lesson in the book. Now, she's using Bitmoji, and if you've never created a comic strip, there are tons of templates and things out there, but y'all, Google Slides, colored background, add some boxes and some bubbles, you got a comic strip. It's not rocket science. The big kids can do this on their own. The little kids probably do need a template, but I do recommend that you try that strategy. Okay. Let's take the old school timeline worksheet, right? We got to know when things happen, the order of events, important dates. What can we do instead of just putting this on a worksheet? What if we created an interactive timeline with Google Slides? The key word there being interactive. So if you didn't know this, inside Google Slides, if you go to insert diagram, there's a whole set of templates for lots of different things, but including timelines that can be edited. You can add images, video, links. Think of how much more multimedia can be embedded in that and how much more students will remember and connect the dots as opposed to just writing down dates. So really, really nice to know that this is kind of hidden in here. Okay, I know I'm running out of time. Instead of the research paper on, say, World War II, what if students did a interview, and I need to update this because I called Hangouts at Google Meet, Zoom, whatever you're using. If we interviewed a war survivor from any war, is that going to help students better understand World War II? Because we're running out of World War II survivors to even talk to anymore. And war is not something that kids really understand. I mean, I remember having to teach World War II and the Holocaust. And I mean, it's such a horrific thing to wrap your head around. And think about how much more powerful it would be if students could talk to someone and ask questions. So this one would definitely go beyond the walls by bringing in someone to do an interview, still writing the paper, still doing the research, but they're talking to someone, which really gives it that personal level of understanding. Okay. Y'all are going to know that I loved Edgar Allan Poe by the end of this. So language arts teacher, Edgar Allan Poe. So this is actually something my mentor taught me. We had this giant packet about Edgar Allan Poe that we would hand out to students at the end of the grading period. Why did we do this? Because it was busy work. So we could finish our grades at our desks and get that put into the grade book. And I look back on this and I'm totally embarrassed, but I want to be, fully truthful that that's what was going on. This was busy work. And this was such a detriment to the most interesting author that we would study all year, right? Y'all, Poe is a weird dude. Kids love learning about Poe. And here I am telling them to be quiet and read their packets and answer their questions. Okay, what would I do now? A collaborative and interactive online ebook about the life of Poe and publish that for a global audience so that they can get feedback from someone outside of the classroom. So that could go beyond the walls and beyond the tools. Lots of great things that we can do with content besides busy work. Okay, what if instead of labeling and coloring a paper map, is this still happening? I don't know how many maps I colored in my days in school. And y'all, I will fully confess, I colored some pretty maps. I was one of those students that had all the colors. Do not ask me where anything is, though. My geography skills are terrible. It did not help me learn anything. So what if instead we had a class-created Google Earth tour project touring the capitals of the US, including images, links, and videos, and then shared that to teach other classrooms? That's going to be sticky learning. That's going to be something they remember. And that, of course, could go beyond the walls if they're sharing it. What if instead of a written biography of Winston Churchill, and it can be a biography of anyone, just taking some of those old school things that we always did, what if instead we had a public class website on inspiring historical figures, both past and present, in which additional content is added throughout the year? Think moving beyond one and done, right? So I can imagine students coming in, hey, Miss Bell, I saw this documentary the other day on this guy named Steve Jobs. Is he an inspiring historical figure? Well, let's talk about that. What is our definition? And again, we are making those connections between the past and the present to help them better understand the content. And so that is working on mindset. And also if we're sharing it outside the walls of the classroom, beyond the walls. And because it is not an ending, it's a continuous ongoing assignment, it would be beyond the due date. Okay, I know I'm running out of time, y'all. Science fair. Science fair is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in schools. And those projects can be just so good from these students. And I have seen so many trifold posters though in my day. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that they need something there, but what can we do that's even better than just a trifold poster? What if they had an interactive website and blog about their science fair project, including the hypothesis, data, video of experiments, reflections, milestones, conclusion, and a place for comments, so that the feedback that they're getting is not just during the fair, that face-to-face, but they're actually can get comments from people who maybe can't even attend in person. To me, that could be really powerful and would definitely go beyond the walls. Okay, I know I have 3 minutes left, and this is another math example, but I'm going to skip and Catherine, check in with you to see if I need to answer any questions.
No, you're doing great. Thanks so
Okay.
much. This is great.
Okay, maybe I think I just have 2 more. Yeah. So this is another word problem for math questions, but math teachers to me struggle a lot with figuring out where does technology fit. You know, like my kids have to work out their problem. They have to do it this way. So with this is something I actually saw demonstrated, and kids solving their word problems, even on paper, right? They're working it out, but then they use Flipgrid and they show their paper on Flipgrid and explain their answer. And sometimes they even have to draw to kind of figure out, okay, because this one example had something to do with a mountain. So there's a mountain and they're talking about it. But being able to explain their answers, reflect on their learning and sharing that through Flipgrid. And if you're not using Flipgrid, you definitely need to take a chance to check that one out. And then our last one here, a worksheet about the scientific method, not picking on science teachers, just that the fact that the scientific method is not something you learn by memorizing it, is something you learn by doing it and applying it. And there's a lot of things that we teach that work that way. So Genius Hour or any kind of PBL project could help students understand this. Where they develop a prototype of a new product that solves a real world problem. And this one, of course, would go beyond the grade and subject. So I know I went really fast through those, but simple ways to upgrade. Publish for a global audience, have students set their own learning goals, create opportunities for students to explore their own interests, use a digital tool in an alternative way, and have students collaborate with other students or experts outside of your classroom. So I want to know, what questions do you have? What lessons are you thinking about upgrading? And how can I help?
That's great, Kasey. Just in the comments, Nikki, thank you. She said, we've seen such a powerful growth in lower elementary with students sharing their math understanding on Flipgrid. So isn't that great? That bringing that learning, making learning visible, thinking visible. So another great tool, and I know you've talked about it on your podcast, Kasey, is Mote. Don't you just love the extension Mote?
I do.
How kids could do their math or whatever thinking in a Google slide and then add narration so much easier than uploading an audio file.
Yes, it is the easiest way.
Yeah, and it's a free extension, but yeah, that's so powerful when so yeah, great stuff. And Kasey, can I share my screen? Because I just was going to share with you because if you're in the class, do you want to discontinue? Okay, so I'm going to start sharing mine and just take to those who are in the class so you can see module 4, Kasey's. They have to design this dynamic learning experience, and you just gave so many great examples. And then I have included the template from your book. It's linked here in the class, and they just will have to make a copy, but it's got that beyond the textbook, beyond the due date, all of those considerations, beyond the bill, beyond the grade level, beyond the walls is right there. So for my students that are watching, my students, LOL, okay, my fellow participants in your course, that template is there to help remember all that stuff. And now you've got all those great examples, not only in the book, but from your webinar. So, I was just looking at some these questions, Kasey, and one of the things I faced, I tried to get my students to blog, and actually it was a really, really great thing. And we had Kid Blog to protect it from an outside audience. And I do run into many districts that are afraid to let their students communicate with a worldwide audience. And I see that I have fellow teachers in this class that are also that way. Do you have any advice or anything that you've seen that works to help administrations and teachers lose their fear of the world for their students?
Well, one thing, because that question came up so much from the first book that I put into the second book, was a little more specific on how to baby step it. Like, it doesn't have to be from day one, kindergarten is blogging for the world, right? That we can have, okay, maybe we're going to share with a classroom across the hall. Then maybe we're going to share with a classroom in the same district. Then maybe we're going to reach outside our district, then outside our region, outside our state, to build from there, that it doesn't have to seem scary. The other thing that I often suggest is we don't need to publish faces. We don't need to publish names. In fact, pen names can be really fun for kids to have, so that we're not seeing that as such a danger. Along with that, though, to administrators, I say, why are we hiding the learning? Because the things that are online are often the bad things that we don't want online. So why aren't we sharing the good stuff? There's so much good that kids do and create that doesn't make the news. So, why do we have to pretend that the outside world doesn't exist? One of the things that I talk a lot about is the lockdown mindset that a lot of schools and administrators still have, pretending, okay, you're going to take a test, but you're going to pretend that the internet doesn't exist. Well, why aren't we asking better questions? Why aren't we asking deeper questions? Why do we still feel like there is only one way to solve a problem? Because real world problems don't have one correct answer. So we're not doing a good job of preparing kids for the future if we pretend that the real world doesn't exist. So that's kind of my soapbox stance on that side of things. But I do believe in protecting kids, don't get me wrong, but I think that we can do it, and we have the tools to do it in a meaningful way. With the littles, the teacher is obviously in charge of publishing, but I've also had senior teachers reach out to me and asking me how to lock things down for a senior level blog. Why? Those kids are getting ready to apply for jobs in college and technical schools. What are they going to find when they're Googled? Because they're going to be Googled. We need to think about that. What is their digital footprint? And we should be helping them create a positive digital footprint that shows what they have learned and accomplished in K-12.
Yeah, that's great. I've heard, and you've probably heard this, but we say, well, we know there's dangerous things in the kitchen like knives, but we don't say to kids, you can't go in the kitchen. That same thing about teach them to be safe in that kitchen. But I love that idea of starting, gradually getting their audience bigger. So yeah, that's great. Another thought here in the questions I thought was great is it seems every time a new technology fad emerges, everyone jumps on board. How can smaller districts with limited resources, and we're Iowa, we have a lot of small districts, Kasey, I know you do in Texas there as well, but how do some smaller districts keep up with this stuff and, and not jump onto trends, but remain up to date? Do you have any advice about how we can stay up to date on what's working and things?
My advice is actually the same for any size district. To me, you rely on your tried and true tools. That's one of the reasons why I talk so much about Google, because it is reliable. I know what it does. I know how to share and I understand it. And because it's all under one login, that I'm not constantly having to create more accounts. The same is true whether, if you're Microsoft or something like that too. But I actually just did a replay podcast that came out today of my very first podcast, which is my top 20 tech tips for teachers. And that's something that I talk about, being consistent, not getting swept away by new tools, because I'm the techie girl that I sign up for everything that's new, but I'm not going to use it in my classroom tomorrow. I used to do that, but I'm not going to do that anymore. We don't want to waste classroom time on things that we are not really sure about. But at the same time, we want to take risks. So for me, it's sticking with the tried and true, but not getting too bored in that system, right? Use the things you know, sprinkle in the new stuff. There is no way to keep up with it all. I can't keep up with it all. That's kind of why you have to pick one area to specialize in. And even just with Google, it changes all the time. So that's just something we have to embrace, that things change and things are available. But if you cannot directly draw the dot between how that tool is going to affect learning in your classroom, then there's no reason to use it. That's really always my bottom line. If it does not help me reach the learning goal, then it is useless. And that's my biggest factor in determining whether it's new or old or whatever it is, how I'm going to use it.
Right. That's great. Well, it's 11:07, so we've already used more than an hour of your time. So thank you for your time, Kasey. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to do some last minute business here with our audience. So if you'd like to sign off, but I'll finish here with just a few minutes of information. I'm just going to share my screen.
Bye, y'all. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. So thank you, all of you, for being with us. I just wanted to finish up with a few things here, and I'll get rid of this screen. Save the date. We have decided, with the world being as in flux as it is, that we're going to go virtual with our Summer Summit in 2022. The dates are June 9th and June 10th. This group of digital learning consultants is already busy securing our keynote speakers. So be on the lookout for the big reveal about who are going to be our keynotes and who we're going to have for webinar for next year. But that morning, 8:30 to noon, you can stay in your jammies, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and let's do some learning together in June in the mornings. We'd love to have you join us there. Also, especially for people in the class, but anybody that's watching, if you would like a partner in building these dynamic learning experiences, we are here. No matter what region you are. You can see Marissa is over here, and Marissa, what's that?
Red.
She's red. Here's Marissa. So if you're in the red region, you're Marissa. If you're in the green, you're Alex Glade. If you're in the purple, you're Jeff Glade. If you're in the or mustard colored, that's Tyler. And if you're in this aqua color, that's me. We would be happy to help you build. Those of you in the class, if you'd like to go through a coaching experience with us, we are happy to sit down and act as that coach with you. And I know a lot of you have coaches in your own districts. Work with your coach, build these dynamic learning experiences. We're super excited to help you. So thank you once again. Oops, we don't need that slide, do we? I'll quit sharing my screen. We're signing off on behalf of the entire Heartland Education Instructional Tech team, now changing to our new title. We are now going to be the Heartland Digital Learning Consultant team. We're happy to help you in any way. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar in February with the HyperDocs girls. See ya.